Welcome to the fascinating journey through the history of the Philippines, a story shaped by ancient kingdoms, foreign conquests, and the enduring spirit of its people. Before we move to the next chapter in our story, don't forget, if you're enjoying this journey through history, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to never miss an episode. Long before European ships arrived, the Philippine archipelago was home to thriving civilizations. The islands were not a blank slate. They were rich with culture, language, and governance. People lived in small, independent communities called barangays. These were ruled by datus, rajas, or sultans depending on the region. Trade was vibrant. Our ancestors exchanged goods with the Chinese, Malays, Indians, Arabs, and even the Japanese. Islam had already spread in the south, particularly in Sulu and Mindanao, introduced by Arab traders and missionaries as early as the 13th century. From the gold mining communities of Luzon to the seafaring warriors of the Visayas and the organized sultanates of the south, the Philippines was a mosaic of cultures. Then came the year 1521. A fleet led by Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, sailing under the Spanish flag, spotted the islands while navigating the Pacific. Magellan first landed on Homonhon Island in eastern Samar. He and his crew were greeted by curious locals. After weeks of island hopping, they arrived in Cebu. Raja Humabon, ruler of Cebu, welcomed Magellan. In a gesture of diplomacy, Humabon and his people were baptized into Christianity. Magellan believed he had found new allies and new converts. But just a few islands away, not everyone was eager to submit. On April 27, 1521, Magellan and his men arrived in Mactan to confront Datu Lapu-Lapu, who refused to recognize Spanish authority. What followed was a fierce battle on the shores of Mactan. Filipino warriors, armed with courage and native weapons, overwhelmed the armored invaders. Magellan was struck down. Lapu-Lapu became the first Filipino hero to resist foreign domination. Though the Spanish eventually returned years later, the Battle of Mactan remains a powerful reminder. The Filipino spirit cannot be conquered easily. Following Magellan's death, Spain's interest in the Philippines did not fade. Decades later, in 1565, Spanish explorer Miguel López de Legazpi arrived, this time with a firmer plan for colonization. Legazpi established the first permanent Spanish settlement in Cebu and began forging alliances and conquering territories. By 1571, he moved north and founded Manila, a key trading hub and eventual capital. Spain ruled the Philippines for over 300 years, marking one of the longest colonial eras in world history. The Spaniards imposed their system of government, replacing the barangays with centralized towns called pueblos. Filipinos were introduced to new laws, taxes, and a foreign monarchy. But more than any sword or musket, the most powerful tool of colonization was the cross. Missionaries spread Catholicism throughout the islands. Towns were built around churches, and mass baptisms were common. In the process, many indigenous beliefs and practices were either suppressed or merged with Catholic rituals, a process scholars call folk Catholicism. Spanish friars held great power, often more than the colonial government itself. They ran schools, controlled land, and influenced local politics. Education was limited and mostly religious. Filipinos were taught to read and write mainly for the purpose of understanding the Bible. The galleon trade connected Manila to Acapulco, Mexico. For over 250 years, goods like spices, silk, and porcelain traveled across the Pacific. Yet beneath this economic activity, social divisions grew. The Spanish elite lived in luxury, while most Filipinos toiled under forced labor or paid high tributes. In the countryside, revolts flared. There were hundreds of uprisings throughout Spanish rule. Most were brutally suppressed. Still, Filipinos endured. Over time, they developed a shared sense of identity, not just as Tagalogs, Visayans, or Ilocanos, but as a united people under a common experience of struggle. By the 1800s, winds of change were blowing. Across Europe and the Americas, revolutions inspired calls for liberty, equality, and national pride. And in the Philippines, a new generation was rising, educated, enlightened, and ready to question the centuries-old colonial order. By the mid-1800s, a new kind of revolution was brewing, not with swords and spears, but with words, books, and ideas. This was the era of the Ilustrados, young Filipinos from wealthy families who were sent to study abroad, mostly in Spain. Among them was José Rizal, a quiet but brilliant man from Calamba, Laguna. His novels, Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, opened the eyes of the Filipino people. Rizal exposed the injustices committed by Spanish friars and corrupt officials. Through his writing, he challenged the entire colonial system without raising a single weapon. Alongside Rizal were other reformists, Marcelo H. del Pilar, Graciano López Jaena, and Antonio Luna, who founded La Solidaridad, a newspaper advocating for equality and reform. But despite their peaceful appeals, Spain refused to grant reforms. Frustration grew back home. Many Filipinos realized that freedom would not come through words alone. In 1892, Andrés Bonifacio, a working-class Filipino from Tondo, founded a secret revolutionary society called the Katipunan. The Katipunan spread like wildfire, recruiting members from all walks of life: peasants, workers, students, and soldiers. On August 23, 1896, Bonifacio and his men tore their cédulas, the hated Spanish identity documents, marking the beginning of the Philippine Revolution. Spanish authorities responded with violence. Martial law was declared. Many Katipuneros were arrested and executed. On December 30th, 1896, José Rizal was executed by firing squad at Bagumbayan, now Luneta Park. He walked calmly to his death, refusing a blindfold. His death became a spark that ignited a nation. Meanwhile, leadership of the revolution shifted to Emilio Aguinaldo, a young general from Cavite. Aguinaldo reorganized the revolution and led successful uprisings in southern Luzon. By 1897, the Spanish were struggling to contain the movement, but conflict also arose within. Bonifacio and Aguinaldo clashed over leadership. The internal struggle led to Bonifacio's tragic execution by fellow revolutionaries. Still, the revolution surged on. The dream of independence was now unstoppable. The Philippine Revolution had taken root, and the world was beginning to take notice. As the revolution raged in the Philippines, a global conflict was unfolding: the Spanish-American War. In 1898, the United States declared war on Spain after the mysterious sinking of the USS Maine in Cuba. The war reached the Pacific. On May 1, 1898, the U.S. Navy under Commodore George Dewey destroyed the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay. Filipino revolutionaries, seizing the opportunity, intensified their fight. Aguinaldo returned from exile with U.S. support and led the final push against the Spaniards. On June 12, 1898, in Kawit, Cavite, Emilio Aguinaldo declared Philippine independence. The national flag was raised. The national anthem was played. It was a moment of pride and triumph. But the joy was short-lived. Unknown to Aguinaldo and the revolutionaries, Spain had already agreed to cede the Philippines to the United States in the Treaty of Paris, signed in December 1898, for $20 million. Once again, the country was under foreign rule, this time not from across the Atlantic, but from across the Pacific. In 1899, the Philippine-American War broke out. Filipino forces fought bravely but were outmatched by the well-armed American troops. The war lasted for 3 brutal years, with some fighting continuing even after. Over 200,000 Filipino civilians died, many due to famine and disease in U.S.-controlled concentration camps. Aguinaldo was eventually captured in 1901. The resistance slowly dwindled. The U.S. established a civilian government. Over time, it introduced public education, infrastructure, and a legislature. But behind the development was the same message: you are not yet ready to govern yourselves. In 1935, the United States allowed the creation of the Philippine Commonwealth, led by Manuel L. Quezon. It was a step toward eventual independence. Then came World War II. In 1941, Japan invaded the Philippines. The islands became a major battleground. The Japanese occupation was brutal. Thousands died in massacres like the Bataan Death March, where over 60,000 Filipino and American soldiers were forced to march under the scorching sun without food or water. But the Filipino people fought back. Guerrilla groups operated in the mountains, supporting Allied forces. The spirit of resistance never died. In 1945, after the Battle of Manila, the city was liberated, but it lay in ruins. Over 100,000 civilians had died, and the capital was reduced to rubble. Finally, on July 4, 1946, the Republic of the Philippines was officially born. After nearly 400 years under foreign control, first by Spain, then the US, and briefly Japan, the nation stood on its own. It was the beginning of a new chapter. The struggle didn't end. It only changed form. But from Lapu-Lapu to Rizal, from Bonifacio to Quezon, the Filipino spirit had endured. The Philippines is more than just islands and borders. It's a story of courage, sacrifice, and hope, a nation still writing its destiny. Thank you for watching this journey through Philippine history. If you learned something new or felt inspired, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. We are the descendants of warriors and thinkers, survivors and dreamers. This is the story of the Filipino people, and it's only just begun.